Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about a headline news item. I try to steer clear of this because it's usually just trafficking and drama. But recently I was going through Hayden's book on intelligence, which is a piece of garbage. There's a lot of very embarrassing errors that he should have avoided. Nevertheless, he does cite this concept known as metacognition, which is the ability to think about the way that you think and to basically hold yourself accountable. You'll see how many people, they make emotional decisions, they rationalize things on the basis of extremes or what they see on the internet, and never consider that maybe what they're seeing on the internet has been curated for them specifically so that it continuously builds up a certain outlook towards the world. Imagine if you were like, I'm a MGTOW. It's like, are you a MGTOW because you've concluded that all women are terrible and like you can't function, you can't find anyone even for a period of time that's halfway decent? Or are you MGTOW because this particular girl was mean to you or broke your heart or rejected you? So you have to have a sense of scale and context if you want to be clear-minded, or you can just fall into the trap of emotional ideological spurging, which I think most people do nowadays to one degree or another. It's really sad, especially with these events, because most folks are not concerned with the people that have lost their lives. Yeah, they say thoughts and prayers, oh, it's horrible, but really there's this rush to try to justify it along certain ideological lines. So if you're a leftist, it's either an angry cream cheeser who doesn't want demographic change, or if it's a POC, it means that it's about guns, right? Or their reaction to racism. If you're a conservative, it's that, oh, this is because they don't have, it's a gun-free zone, they don't have police there, or, oh, it's a false flag. If it's someone affiliated with their politics, it must be a false flag, which is kind of strange, and we'll talk about that in a bit here. Now, going along with the title, let's ask, who precisely benefits? I've seen this meme tossed around by a lot of right-wing conservatives. Oh yeah, they had to do something because they're going to use the House, and they're not going to have the Republicans in there. I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to be rude to anyone, but can someone please explain to me why the GOP would be a visible, mounting threat to these high-profile, poetic, alphabet rappers, Phoebe, Nissa, Atfa, Chia Seeds? Has the GOP ever said openly that they're going to defund these organizations? No. And in truth, they just give them more money, right? They've expanded them regularly. It's just really kind of funny. The most you would get is another Jim Jordan hard-hitting investigation. We're going to be calling witnesses. We're going to be cracking down on this government corruption. They're going to do nothing, okay? It's going to be another Benghazi at best. There's no threat from Republicans. And you might make the argument that it's better that people can actually elect Republicans to the House, because that'll sate a lot of these rage pillars who are frustrated and angry, and they'll say, oh yeah, America's loyal opposition is back. Think about it. That's like the higher level view. Maybe it's not that they're trying to scare people into voting Democrats. Maybe they want you to have the illusion that you control power still. And by the way, didn't these same people for like the last almost 2 years say the 2020 election was rigged to get Bidet in power? So they could rig a presidential election, but they can't rig the midterms magically. Why is that? Things are different this time. Reminds me of the liberals in 2007. I used the internet not so much back then, but I would see these posts, or I think I even saw an article at one point, guy claiming that Bush was going to cancel the 2008 elections, declare himself dictator for life, or install McCain. We also knew this very right-wing, but also atheist guy from Eastern Europe who lived under communism, and he said, yeah, there's no way that Bush will allow Obama in office. He's going to, McCain's got it locked. And then once Barack the Booty Obama came in, I would go looking for these same posts and responses to them, and people were trying to troll these liberals like, what happened? You said it was going to be rigged, and these guys would go, I don't know, I guess the system just worked in our favor, it must have been a glitch. Oh, so you basically have a halfway functional democracy? Do you guys remember last year when Yenkin won in incel land, but then in Jersey, Chatterteeth lost. So was it that did they rig the election in Jersey, but they couldn't rig it in incel land, even though it was only like an 80,000 vote margin? And for the other races, it was even narrower. Just asking the question, and we'll go more into this whole craziness over whether they want to give you an illusion of control later in the video. But let's, again, concentrate on the who does it benefit. I know there have been some whisperings, but I don't know what to take seriously. People were saying he was on the same Discord as the Buffalo dance guy. There was a federal agent maybe involved. Then they said this guy is POC, and there were allegations that he was transracial. But then they said, no, he's not transracial. So regardless, it's a POC that goes and murders a bunch of Hispanic kids in a school. Tell me exactly how that fits a narrative that helps the Democrats. Okay, young men who are angry and they want to, take out and get a good reputation. But this is a very sadistic crime. It's not directed at the state, so it's not like it's threatening state power in the way of like the hoedown throwdown last year in D.C. In addition, the cops, for the most part, were also POCs, right? I saw this very sickening comment on Huffington Post where someone said, well, they didn't want to respond because the kids weren't blonde with blue eyes. And someone was going, well, yeah, the cops are POC. It doesn't matter. They see it the same way. It's part of the blue badge or whatever. I was like, these people, seriously. If Goldberg was president, there would be mass institutionalizations of people. And I say across the spectrum, but particularly these psychopaths. I would put them in institutions for life, plain and simple. Very humanitarian. We just put them in the institutionalization camps. Oh, sorry. No. I didn't say camp. Institution. Arkham Asylum. That's what we're talking about. Okay. So that's what I would do. But seriously, the narrative, it doesn't really fit with a liberal narrative. Yeah, I guess in guns to a certain extent, but the cops didn't respond, so it kind of undermines state authority to some degree. What I had first heard is that there was some off-duty Border Patrol officer grabbed a shotgun from a barbershop, went in and dropped this psychopath. But then they were saying later, this was kind of the catching up narrative, so I guess they lost control of it. They said, oh no, the feds, they were the ones that went in. The local cops wouldn't, the local conservative cops wouldn't. I don't know who's buying that nonsense, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you really have to be stretching the lengths of your belief to actually come to that conclusion. So the takeaway is not exactly pro-authority, pro-establishment, right? In fact, there was no school resource officer there. About a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, leftists were calling for the end of school resource officers because that one white cop body slammed the 300-pound land whale black girl who was attacking people, and it was on video. This is not exactly an endorsement of liberalism and you need to run to the government for help. It's actually more voluntarist. The guy who's off duty does his thing. He's not armed, but he grabs something and goes to town. The parents being handcuffed and tased, allegedly. Even if you are, laying aside the Bernie Booty Boy type who's just going to call for more government, if you're a moderate liberal power bottom who voted for Biden because we have to restore America from tyranny, you're probably looking and saying, okay, think of the white middle class parent. I need to buy a gun to defend myself and my kid. I need to maybe put my kid in a private school or maybe even homeschool them. Perhaps you could say they're going to try to do lockdowns and make everyone do distance learning because schools are unsafe. Well, that actually takes children out of the immediate purview and control of the government. Yeah, they'll be at home, but they'll be very likely, if their parents are remote learning, they're closer to the parents. They're less inclined to take influence from peer groups that are typically degenerate. And they're going to ignore the teacher and just do their own thing. So they're almost becoming more of an independent thinker in that environment than they are being in class. So you're saying, is it really helping the left, this whole thing? At least the way the narrative came out, it's like you can't trust the police, you can't trust. Previously, there was the shooting where that neckbeard attacked the church, I believe, and they said he shouldn't have even been allowed to buy a gun, but it was something with the Air Force or the FBI. They didn't do the background check properly, they didn't put the information in. So Who's really coming away from this saying we need more federal intervention? Exactly. I don't, it's not evident to me, right? So you say, where precisely is this reaction going to come from? It's interesting to note, of course, how this tells you a lot about conservatism as well. Because do you notice how conservatives tend to, appeal to these grandiose images of voluntarism? That's why they're like, this hero guy who responded to the shooter, the militia that rises up against the tyrannical government and restores the Constitution. But they don't really like the implications of it. It's weird how everyone's kind of trying to hedge on the basis of their reputation and position in liberal society. So boomers now have come to the point where they're talking about demographic replacement. When this whack job kid, shot all the black people, or mostly black people in New York, they're like, oh, no, that has to be a false flag to take away our liberties and our whites. Well, but that's, in some sadistic way, that's a voluntarist act. But they seem to think they're going to win power. The Republicans are going to remove like 10 million people from the country, and in that population transfer, you're not going to have people dying. You're not going to have like resistance. You're not going to have civil strife and conflict. It's all going to be sanitized, and the liberals will agree that it's lawful. I mean, people are so just delusional, so far up their own asses on both sides. They don't even understand what they want. They just want to constantly like maintain this illusion that I'm a good person in the eyes of society, but I'm also with these crazy appeals to my political fantasies. Let's then hone in on the claim that this is about taking away freedoms. I have seen this argument made at least since Sandy Hook, which is, I believe, almost a decade old. Immediately, Obama had said, we need to do something on guns to protect kids, and there were all these conservatives sharing images of Hitler surrounded by kids. This is what Hitler did. He surrounded himself with kids when he was trying to take away guns from the Care Bears. It's like everything's this extreme nonsensical idea, right? And it's all manipulated to, get us to lose our rights for guns. And you're like, well, maybe that's not what they want. Maybe they would prefer that you are the land whale who has a Gadsden flag plate on your truck. It's jacked up, of course, gas guzzler. And every time there's a school shooting or some other event, you go out and you buy 2,000 rounds of ammunition and some new toys. And you talk about, oh yeah, we're going to set up a perimeter out in the country. Yeah. And you're not going to do anything, though. I know it because with the whole pincushion, the number of guys were like, oh, don't tread on me, man. No, screw you, Biden. And as soon as he said you're going to lose your job, they rolled right over. And I was like, why? Well, I got to pay for my truck and my guns. I'm like, exactly. My beer. Here. Exactly. Most of these guys are legends in their own mind. They are not a threat to anyone. They're actually, it's easier to just keep them occupied with their, I'm going to go buy more guns and, talk about how I'm going to restore the Constitution, which they're not going to do. Whereas if you actually go out and go door to door and start seizing people's weapons, that would cause more of a problem than just letting them go off in their playpen, essentially. Now, if you actually went to these folks and said, you can either hand over the gun or you're going to go to jail, most of them would probably do it because, again, if you're not willing to give up a fiat paycheck over a pincushion, do you think you're going to really do it over a gun? I don't think so. All right. Arguably, the injection, if it is in fact bad for you, is a lot worse than you not having this particular type of gun. I'm sure we can have debates over that. Still, just because the Second Amendment is there, the Second Amendment is a supreme form of law, but it is subject to interpretation. Of course, a lot of leftists hang on that well-regulated militia part, and so that's how the opinions come. Well, you can have these controls, but the guy's saying they're trying to take away our rights and liberties. Have you noticed that this has already happened, depending on the point of view? Like, you ever heard of an FFL? There's certain guns you can't import. You can't typically buy fully automatic weapons. You can modify some of them. You can't buy like RPGs, to my knowledge, or you certainly can't buy military equipment like howitzers. Correct me if I'm wrong on that if you're a big weapons enthusiast. So there are regulations and controls. There are background checks in place in certain areas. So at what level does it become infringement? when they're just going door to door, or they're just adding on some new layers here and there. And these guys, again, they're just going to go out, buy a bunch of guns, talk all the smack, drink some beers, and they're not really a big deal. The illusion that you have power is a much bigger aphrodisiac than telling the person you have none, and basically you have less to lose if you have none. Whereas if you can live this nice illusion with your big truck and your guns and go into the range, that's actually much better if they want to keep control of you, just saying. As far as my own view on why these sick things are happening, you can appeal to a lot of things. You can talk about mental illness. You can talk about, oh, it's being manipulated by someone else, so there's a reason behind it. It's broken families, whatever. Let's talk about practical stuff. If you have kids, you probably don't want them in public school. Laying aside the risk to their lives, I mean, you've got all the Marxist propaganda, you've got your kids being exposed to this psychopath who is, again, broken family, probably mental issues. It's just a daycare for basically the scum and villainy of society, because we don't have any quality control. Ever since they said, oh, everyone has to go to the same schools because it's racist or whatever, you have less and less control. And now all the pharmaceuticals, all the mental illness. I mean, there's a lot of factors going into this. And you're not going to be able to fix them by waving a wand. So don't put your kids in public school. If you want to conceal carry, that's not a bad idea, but you need to actually be proficient with it. A lot of people, they watch movies and they get really bad ideas from movies about handling weapons. Wherever you are, this is what I do. I don't go out a lot. And you say, you should be running game, Goldberg. Yeah. You saw the whole Pulse thing that happened. I don't frequent those venues. Homosexual dance bars, I don't. But even in, was it Toledo or Cleveland, when the dude with the body armor started mowing people down, that's like something I really don't like the idea of, because it's dark, you can't see anything, you have no vantage points, people are, all over the place. That's why I don't go out to a lot of venues as much as I used to. But even if you're at a department store, you're at, say, a Walmart, you should be going in, getting the stuff you need, knowing what your environment is, your surroundings, and leaving. Don't linger around, because you think about it, most of those places, if some whack job opens up, you've got no cover, right? There's a bunch of clothes hangers. It's going to go right through that. You're going to be Swiss cheesed. It's just basic stuff like that. You have to be aware of your environment. We are dealing with this. I was at the grocery store a couple months ago, and this Hispanic bald cell was looking at me, and I swear he had Satan inside of him. Like, I don't know. I was just kind of looking at him. I kind of like smirked at him, and I was seeing if he's like maybe looking at something else. And this dude just kept looking at me like this death stare. I'm going, yeah, you know what? Never underestimate how much people hate their lives and are willing to have any excuse to end it. There's a lot of people do stupid stuff because they're angry. They just want an excuse. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to just grab my stuff and I'm leaving. You have to have common sense, right? We are living in a sick society, regardless of whether this is just being caused by, broken families or mental illness, or this is being manipulated by something else. You have to be careful about where you are, and you have to pay attention. You cannot act like happy-go-lucky. You don't have to be paranoid, but you have to be aware. And if you're going around with your head in your phone and, oh yeah, go out to the freaking bar or go out to the club all the time, you never know. It's sad we've gotten to that point, but you really never know. Be smart and be safe.